To change the upholstery on your Rialto reformer, you're going to need a mallet, a screwdriver, Phillips head, and a combination wrench. A socket wrench with a ratchet handle helps a lot too, but if you only have a combination wrench, that's fine. Then you also need 2 Allen wrenches that should come with your kit.
Hi, my name is Kayleen and I'm the Pilates mechanic here in the BB Garage. Today I'm going to show you how to replace the upholstery on your Rialto reformer. We're going to start with the most complicated first, which is the carriage pad, and then move on to the headrest and the shoulder rests. Okay? So I've already unpacked my carriage pad here, my replacement, and I just want to say when you unpack your upholstery, whether it's the carriage pad or the shoulder rests or whatever, just be really careful with whatever sharp blade you use with the packaging because you don't want to nick any of your new stuff. Okay? So before we get that involved, let's disassemble and get this existing piece ready to go. Okay? So I'm going to take the ropes off. Unspring the carriage and then flip the carriage over and crosswise on the frame. When you flip this over, just be sure that there's upholstery touching the frame on both sides so you don't scratch the frame with any of this harder stuff up by the headrest. Okay, now we're ready to take our old upholstery off of this undercarriage part. There are several things we need to take off of this carriage pad before we can install the new one. So we want to make sure that when we remove hardware, we don't throw it away. So the first thing we're going to take off is this silver bracket, okay? And to be able to do that, let's get rid of the springs, actually. All right, so here you can use a combination wrench. I'm going to use a socket for the sake of speed, and I'm going to take off this bracket and by loosening these bolts here. Okay, I'm going to take this bracket off and put it and the nuts and washers in a safe place because we'll need them again. Next, I need to remove this nylon webbing that acts as the spring holders. Okay, so I'm going to use a Phillips screwdriver, or you can use a power drill. Okay. And again, we need to save all of this hardware and the webbing for the new carriage pad, so don't lose any of it. Okay, so I'm putting my nylon strap and the 6 wood screws with washers off to the side because I will need them again. The last thing we need to do is to remove this carriage pad from the rails. And there are 4 nuts we need to remove. Now over here towards the foot end of the carriage, so away from the headrest, you can see that there's 1 protruding threaded stud with a nut and a washer.
Okay, so that's the one of them that we need to do. Now, on the side closest to the headrest, way up here, you'll see that there are two threaded studs sticking up. You want to be sure to do the one closest to the springs, because the one on the other side that's closest to the headrest doesn't have anything to do with the carriage pad. It's all, it needs to stay there to keep the headrest and cam cleat area attached. Okay, so we're going to do this nut and then the nut at the foot end on both sides. To do this, we're going to use a combination wrench. I need to save the nut and the washer from this threaded stud, if I can get it out of here. And then I'll repeat that unthreading for the other three studs. Okay, now I've got 4 washers and 4 nuts. I'm going to put them in a safe place and get my tools out of the way. So put them in a safe place. And I'm going to grab the new carriage pad. Now the carriage pad hardware, all these threaded studs that are sticking up, is not symmetrical. So you want to make sure that the gap, the thin gap between the edge and the threaded stud is towards the headrest, and the big gap between the edge and the threaded stud is towards the springs or the foot end of the carriage. And it looks like this carriage has hardware on it right now, so I'm going to go ahead and take off the nuts and the washers before I transfer over the skeleton. Now, if your new carriage pad comes with all this hardware pre-installed, let's go ahead and put it off to the side and not use it. These aren't exactly the right types of nuts, so I'm going to use the hardware from the older carriage pad. Okay, so now we should just be able to gently lift off the skeleton from the old carriage pad. I'm just going to guide the headrest as well and lift it onto the new carriage pad. Making sure to keep the headrest out of the way. Okay, we should be able to line right up. Now, if this doesn't go on very smoothly, you can see I'm trying to get one hole in here. You might need to grab a mallet and give it a gentle tap. Okay, there we go. Okay, so some patients here, I've definitely struggled with these in the past, but they should fit with some patience and smart wiggling. Okay, all right, so let's grab our hardware, the 4 washers and the 4 nuts that we took off so that we can replace them and secure the carriage pad to the carriage skeleton. All right, I'm going to put a washer on the protruding stud and then a nylock nut, making sure that the little rubber O-ring is facing up. And I can only go so far with my hand, and then I'll have to use the wrench and some patience. I'm going to go ahead and snug this down. It does not need to be really, really tight, but I'm just going to make sure it's secure. Then I'll go on up and do the next one. Okay, now we're ready to put the spring bracket back on. I'm going to grab my socket, the bracket, and the hardware that we saved from earlier. Be sure that the spring bracket is positioned so that the slots are closest to the foot end of the carriage. Otherwise, if you put it in reverse, this way, the springs will run into the threaded studs. Okay. So we'll use a washer first, and then a nylock nut. And then I'll finish this with a socket. It's much faster. Our last task on this carriage pad is to replace the nylon webbing that holds the springs when they're not hooked onto the frame. So I'm going to grab my existing nylon, my existing hardware, and my Phillips screwdriver. Of course, you can use a power drill here if you want to speed things up. Your carriage pad should have pre-drilled holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's where you're going to start your screws. Okay, so you can see I've got a washer and a screw already in the nylon, and you'll see that the nylon has holes from the first installation. So we're just going to use those same holes in the nylon to put the screws through, and then to secure it to the carriage pad. Before I tighten this down too much, I'm going to position the nylon in the correct orientation. All right, next one. Okay, our spring holder strap is in place, our bracket's in place, our skeleton's secured to the new pad. We can replace the springs now and flip the carriage back over to finish with the headrest and the shoulder rests. Notice the spring hook orientation here. They're all facing up so that when I flip the carriage over, they will then be facing the floor. And that way they won't fall off when they aren't hooked up to the frame. I'm going to hook up a couple springs here just to keep the carriage in place, and then we'll get going with the headrest. To remove the headrest, I need an Allen wrench. And we're going to remove these 3 screws that attach the headrest to the carriage, okay? Okay, now this old headrest needs to be disassembled. Your new headrest comes without this extra hardware. Let me show you. Okay, so it looks like this. And we need to take off the hinge and put the hinge down here. And then the headrest support block needs to go up here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take off this old hardware and put it on the new headrest. When transferring the hinge, make sure you put it on the right set of holes. Okay, so I took the hinge off of these holes that are really close to the edge. So I'm going to put it on to the new pad in the same holes that are close to the edge. Okay. I'm going to snug these down with the long end of the Allen wrench, but they do not need that much muscle. Okay, they're just snug. Okay, we'll do the same thing with the support block here. I'm going to take off these screws. Okay, I'm going to put my old headrest out of the way. Now, when we put the new headrest support block on, make sure it's in this orientation, okay? If you put it on upside down, it won't work right. So we're going to install it just like this. Again, I'll use the long arm of the Allen wrench to snug these down, but they do not need to be so tight that you can't move them. They should just be tough to move. All right, our headrest is now ready to be put back on to the carriage. So we're going to align it just like this. And then you'll have to use a little bit of force because the soft edge of this headrest and the carriage will have to touch, okay? And then I'm going to align the holes here, okay? It might help in this instance to get one screw started by hand first. And that way this won't go anywhere. You can apply better force. I'll go ahead and start the other ones. Okay. Now I can get my Allen wrench in there to tighten them down. Whoops. Almost done. Okay, there we go. Our new headrest is installed. Now, if you have multiple of these and you're going to be really comfortable doing this, you could switch up the order a little bit and put the headrest on and off without the carriage pad on. But that's a lot of flipping and flopping of positions. So know that I'm showing you one order to do things in, but you can see that it's not always that easy. So if you figure out a more smooth order to do this in, where you're not fighting the cushions, then go for it. Okay, we've got one more set to do, which is our shoulder rest. So let's get to it. Like the headrest, okay, we have to use the existing shoulder rest hardware. So these are our old shoulder rests, and you can see that they are attached to this bracket with 4 silver screws. Okay. We're going to remove these 4 screws and use them to install this bracket on our new shoulder rests. When you do that, you'll notice that there are multiple holes on this shoulder rest. So it's very important that we put the brackets on in the, install them on the correct holes. So I'll talk a little bit about that when we start to screw in the screws on the new shoulder rests. Okay, so to start, let's remove the screws. And get these out of the way. So I've removed the screws. Now, when I transfer this bracket over to the new shoulder rest, we need to notice the hole pattern and which holes the bracket was installed on the original shoulder rest. So you can see here there are 2 holes showing on the left side. So when I put it on the bracket on the new shoulder rest, we're going to do the same thing, okay? 2 holes showing on the left side. You can even see on the old shoulder rest there's a little indentation, okay? And if you take the bracket off before you notice that, then you can just refer to the indentation, okay? So I'm going to use the existing hardware and secure the bracket in these 4 holes. Oops. Make sure you give enough pressure onto the screws so that the threads engage with the nut that's inside the shoulder rest. Otherwise, you'll just spin and nothing will happen. I'm going to tighten these screws down with the long end of the Allen wrench. You can see that these aren't so tight that they would actually create impressions on the shoulder rest. So we're going to give it a nice tighten so that the bracket is flush and pressed into a little bit the shoulder rest padding. There we go. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So let's do the same thing on the other shoulder rest. I'm going to remove these 4 screws and put the bracket on in the same hole pattern on the new shoulder rest. I'm going to line up my shoulder rests so I know which holes to put them in. Transfer it over. Okay. Now I've got the new shoulder rest brackets installed on the new shoulder rests, okay? And to make sure that they're in the correct holes, you should line them up right next to each other. And make sure that the holes that are free are either both in the middle, or if you reverse them, both on the outside, okay? If you were to line these up and you had holes showing here and holes showing here, then one of the brackets would be installed in the wrong holes, okay? So this is what they should look like when you're done. Now these shoulder rests are ready to be installed on the carriage. So I'm gonna take my old shoulder rests, toss them, and you can install your shoulder rests in the wide or the narrow position. So right here, they're in the wide position. If we were to swap them, they would be in the narrow position. And then I'll just reinsert this knob in the hole and tighten it all the way down so that the shoulder rests are secure and they don't wiggle. Okay, there we go. All right, let's get the carriage pad out of the way, and then we can rethread the ropes. Okay, so I'm hooked up. We'll just rethread these ropes through the cam cleats. Making sure the drape of the ropes match. And now we're ready to use the Rialto with its new upholstery. Thanks for joining me here today in the BB Garage. If you need more videos like this one, you can go to pilates.com/bbgarage. I'll see you over there.